Hey everyone, welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you're here. This is a special Catalyst report. It is entitled The Pleiadian Revival. We're going to look at the astrology of the next couple months as our lunar nodal axis shifts into the position of the Pleiades. So if you don't know what that is, don't worry. I will explain these things as we go along. So welcome back, everyone. If you're new to this channel, welcome. Thank you for stopping by and checking this out. And a special thank you and welcome and shout out to my patrons on Subscribestar. Truly, it's not just the investment in me or in this creation of this content that I am stoked about. It's really the investment in yourself. Even something as minimal as $3 a month to continue the process of your own growth, your own learning, your own process of becoming is actually really valuable. So I'm happy to be able to provide or facilitate that process for you. So the Pleiadian revival is all about the nodal axis of the moon shifting into a position. The north node will be in conjunction with the Pleiades. The south node will be opposite of that. So we're going to go over some just kind of get a basic idea of what we're talking about here. The Pleiades as a star cluster, the Pleiades as a ET race that we are here on Earth supposedly intimately involved with. I do believe that we are. And also the concept of the starseed markings in the chart. So this is certainly about astrology and how important the next couple of months really, really are. Not only are we in an eclipse cycle that started with a full moon lunar eclipse with an eclipsed moon in conjunction with the Pleiades. So we are in now an even more concentrated window within that time span that takes us out to May of all of these really powerful Pleiadian markings in the chart that are interacting with each other and really directing the course of our soul's evolution and our own soul learning and growing. And so sometimes the experiences of our outer consciousness or more individualized consciousness and the day-to-day experiences that we have can sometimes be not in alignment with what is pulling us at a soul level and this direction toward not only the Pleiades right now, but Taurus and the second house are very much about resources, and Scorpio in the eighth house are very much about the shared resources that we produce when we come together in cooperation. So the economy is going to be a big focus for our soul's growth over the next 18 months, because that's roughly how long these nodes travel through a particular zodiacal sign in the sky. So this is tropical astrology or Western astrology in particular that we're utilizing. And so many levels, the next couple of months are going to be around resources, the production of those resources in our relationships. And that can be all kinds of resources. The economy, though, does feel poised, especially with Capricorn and Cancer involved in all of this. That we are going through massive structural change, and part of it is drawing us towards value and worth that is inherently there, that is from the actual world around us that we are embedded in, which is very much Taurus in the second house. And the Pleiadian nature is it's the closest ET nature, I would say, to our actual original blueprint as humans on this planet, that the return to that particular part of ourselves is also a big part of our growth and evolution over the next couple of months, while the nodes are in this position of being in conjunction, especially the north node. That's where we're being drawn to the Pleiades. So there's no shortage of branding for the Pleiadian nature. That's not unusual as we get into some more imagery here that I'm going to share with you. I mean, the Pleiades as a star cluster, you can see right here, it's 7 stars. 6 are only visible to the naked eye, yet all of these ancient cultures, the Pleiades are cross-cultural, historical. So the fact that it's, so embedded in our modern culture right now in terms of story and other aspects, branding. I mean, we just have to take one look here. I'll show you in a minute, the branding. It's not that unusual to have the Pleiades as a star cluster, as a mythological focus, right? And as something that we pay attention to in our own culture in terms of mythology. It's not that unusual that it would still continue now. There's something that's something so intimately familiar with this that it has made itself part of the fabric, the narrative fabric of every culture that we know of in terms of our modern historical and archaeological perspective. So it's not that unusual, but it also means that we should be very mindful about the branding and the connection that it's made to certain types of expression. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about the Pleiadians, who I know them to be, starseed markings, and how maybe their role has been kind of co-opted, maybe by others that are not actually Pleiadian, but they are coming off as if they are. So discernment is going to be really key. And the thing about Taurus in particular, and Uranus is stationing direct to like this week as I'm recording this is the 14th, it's going to station direct in Taurus. So that shifting landscape and that awakening energy that Uranus represents is going to start waking up in the realm of resources, in the realm of material fixed reality, assets, currency, are anything that has to do with the soil of the land, right? The fertility of the world around us that is represented by Taurus and Venus, right? So Venus is kind of the patron of the Pleiades to a certain extent. So there is a lot to talk about in this realm. So I'm just going to, and there's so much, you can just go and dive in. There's no shortage of information, but this is why discernment is really, really important. So let's talk about the Pleiades just as a star cluster, and then we'll kind of get gradually more woo about it as we go along. So you can see that this is a telescope version. You have all 7 major stars. The Pleiades star cluster is very young in terms of star clusters. It's only like 10 million years old. That's not very old. The stars are bright, they're blue, they're young, right? And they stick out in terms of our astronomical perspective and attention, right? Pleiades as a star cluster is very visible as a star cluster. It's in the shoulder of Taurus, the bull. So if we look here in relation to Orion, this is a big part of the mythology that we'll get into. The Pleiades are this very obvious cluster. Now, 6 stars are visible to the naked eye, but every culture knew that there were 7, and they had a story that explained that 7th one. How did they know that? I don't know, but we know that it's true because now we have telescopes that are able to show us these things. So here is Orion in the sky. Here's Aldebaran. This is the right eye of the bull, Taurus, the constellation, and then Pleiades right in the shoulder. You have Orion lifting the club and has the shield and is focused kind of on this trajectory towards the Pleiades. Now in Greek mythology, the Pleiades, the 7 sisters, right? They were put into the sky to protect them from who? Orion, the hunter. So there is quite a bit of the story told in the sky in terms of all of the different traditions that basically have said on some level that the 7 sisters needed to be scooped up and placed somewhere safe so that they wouldn't be, because they were being pursued by something, a hunter, for instance. And we also know that Orion and a lot of the stars in Orion, especially Orion's belt, these are Orion starseed. These are Orion starseed positions, right? And Aldebaran is related to Archangel Michael, right? This is one of the fixed royal stars at 9 degrees Gemini. And then the Pleiades at roughly 24 degrees Taurus up to 0 degrees Gemini. So if we look at a different image here, we can see, again, here is Aldebaran. Here's the actual constellation of Taurus, the Pleiades in the shoulder, Orion in the same configuration. And if we look at the Pleiades through a telescope again, this is what you see. Spectral class in terms of astrophysics, blue is higher energy, right? These are younger, they are hotter, they output way more energy, they're usually bigger, like they have more mass, which is how a star is able to be hotter and bigger, is because they have more hydrogen fuel. So this is the Pleiades, again, through a telescope. Now, let's talk about... well, let's look at that. I wanted to show you that. So imagine seeing that with the naked eye. So when the Pleiades have their heliacal rising, right? This is when the star cluster rises with the sun in the east. And so right before dawn, you see the Pleiades rising. This was a marker for people in terms of agriculture and farming, in terms of navigation in Greek society, Greek culture, especially maritime structure here. When when the Pleiades rose in the east with the sun, right before the sun, that was the cue for navigation. That was time to go out. And this is usually in early summer. And then you have the heliacal rising of Sirius. If you go back here, is it this one? No. Oh, no, it's here. Then you have the heliacal rising of Sirius that's happening not too long after that. So the Pleiades would be up here in this picture, right, off the screen, and here's Sirius here, which if you've seen my presentation about the Orion star seed and how I learned to stop worrying and love the duality, because that's what the Orions have been doing, and they have been making themselves known over the past year and a half, especially with that North Node in Gemini, much earlier in its progression. That Sirius and Orion are inextricably linked as the necessary components of creation. So there's something connected to the Pleiades as well that's part of it. It's just in a line, right? So Pleiades here, Orion's belt, Aldebaran, and then Sirius. They all line up with each other. So they're all part of the story. And but this is the Pleiadian part of the story. So let's look at the Seven Sisters. This is a pretty famous painting of the Seven Sisters. So we're going to talk about it from Greek mythology, because it was the Seven Sisters. They were the daughters of the Titan Atlas, right, holding up the world. And their mother was some sort of ocean nymph, some sort of immortal, but not quite a goddess. They were being pursued by Orion, so Zeus puts them in the sky to protect them. In ancient or in American indigenous cultures, there are many stories about the Pleiades being seed points, star people, ancestors, and one of them in particular is I can't remember the particular group, but the Seven Sisters were, again, brought up into the sky from Devil's Tower, right? And if you know the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Devil's Tower is exactly where they had their contact, and that's what he's building out of mashed potatoes, and everybody that's had contact is like going insane, building and seeing and drawing Devil's Tower. Well, in that particular indigenous culture, that story about Devil's Tower was where, so the Seven Sisters, the Pleiades, right, they were taken away to protect them. So that can have a lot of different meanings. We could talk all day about that. And that's why it's so important that you just dive into the material and really check your own gut, because that's what this is all about. This is about getting into the planetary grid itself, getting into the vibration of the planet as a living being, the Lemuria versus Atlantis, right? Lemuria is much more the Pleiadian sequence and traits. So Zeus puts them in the sky to keep them from Orion, the Orions, right? Gemini, the duality aspect of Orion is their primary source of power. And you can see that you can watch Dan Winter's stuff. He talks a lot about that. I'm getting more information daily about this particular aspect of our own, our own planetary history. But again, this is about the Pleiades and the Pleiadians. So the seven sisters, right? They were immortalized. And so let's talk about ancient astrology, because it's important to dispel some things that I think have maybe intentionally been put out there to take away the full knowing of what these beings may or may not be. So we get our mythological aspects. They're seven sisters, right? They are women. It's divine feminine, right? They are the consorts of Diana, right? Or is it Athena? Diana, she is she's the goddess. She's the head deal. And it's not, and maybe that's Venus, right? No, that's Aphrodite. That's Aphrodite. So they were the consorts of Diana. This is what they were, because they weren't goddesses, but they weren't mortal either. Their parents were both not human, right? They were a Titan, and they're considered very sorrowful. In ancient astrology, anything related to the Pleiades, number one, is related to navigation, which makes a lot of sense, of course, because of the Heliacal rising every year at the certain time. And now it's spreading out because we have a wobble. So those fixed stars change position relative to us like every 26,000 years. There's a cycle. So it is changing, but for the most part, it's the heliacal rising of the Pleiades that signals that it's time to plant, or that it's time to go out to sea, and you use it to navigate. But they are very sorrowful because they had to watch their father hold up the world. And one of them, Alcyone, the main one, the one that's probably in the foreground right here is my guess, is not only the main sister, but she suffered the same fate that Medusa did, right? Which was basically in some way being either seduced or raped, or in some way had a sexual encounter with Poseidon that was not necessarily wanted or sanctioned. It could go, who knows how it went, but the ocean itself, right, coming in to make some sort of connection to Alcyone. Right, that's what happened to Medusa, but she was mortal, so she turned into a monster. Alcyone was just really, really sad, and I'm sure that they had an offspring that had its own challenges. But this is the story of the seven sisters. They needed to be put up into the sky. They needed to be taken off the planet in order to protect them from essentially the Orion group. But in mythology, it is Orion as a giant, as a hunter, possibly the Nephilim, right? It could be any number of those interpretations. So there's no shortage of, like I said, there's no shortage of branding. We'll get into that when it comes to the Pleiadian nature. I mean, look at this. This is just Pleiadian starseed in Google Images, and this is just over and over and over. Look at this: T-shirts, frisbees, books, a very specific geometric configuration that is obviously a branding technique for Pleiadian starseeds. This is something that we should take very seriously, because ancient sacred geometry is no joke. And it is an energetic language in one fell swoop that can have real impact. And I want to know why this is so related to the Pleiadian. Look at this: T-shirts. We cannot understate the amount of branding that goes into being a Pleiadian starseed or being a Pleiadian. And again, it's not unusual considering, look at this, right? It's not unusual considering the fact that the Pleiades have been embedded in the culture of every society that we've known, probably all the way back to, the Sumerians, basically. And I'm sure before, because it's the Atlantean story that's going to be a big part of this next couple of months, right? Because if you read Bringers of the Dawn, then you know that Atlantis was an experiment and it didn't work, right? And this is a big part of the reckoning for our current time frame and the evolution of humanity, because we keep not being able to evolve past the ability to stave off a massive energetic restructuring that, essentially wipes out the whole planet. So, okay, so yeah, there's no shortage of branding, and so this is why discernment is incredibly powerful. Somebody is very invested in directing and steering the Pleiadian narrative. So again, channeling any kind of, transmissions that you get from places, just be very discerning. And that is the Pleiadian nature, is check your gut. So I find this very suspicious. That's just me. Though, this particular geometry, and how open and available it is in this very 1111. I mean, it could just be a particular screen printing company, but we have to be discerning about this. All right, so let's look at the astrology, the aspects of ancient astrology when it comes to the Pleiades. First of all, here's Taurus, here's Aldebaran, here's the Pleiades in the shoulder. Now we can't talk about this part, this part of the sky without talking about Medusa, because she is smack dab in the middle of this in terms of the latitude, right? Algol, or Medusa, the head of the Gorgon, right, in the constellation Perseus, but she's at 26 to 27 degrees Taurus. It's in the same part of the sky, same degree as the Pleiades. So we can, and again, like I just talked about, Alcyon and Medusa suffered the same exact fate or same exact experience with Poseidon. That was a sexual encounter that was either unwanted, unsanctioned. Something about it was not okay. And they both suffered in different ways. But Alcyon, again, up into the sky, Medusa was mortal. And so she had to live with the consequences of her trauma, being out on the outside of her and living through that. So very interesting connections here. So we like I said, we can't talk about the Pleiades because this particular degree is going to come into effect at different points throughout the next couple of months. But ultimately, if we are, let's go back to this while I talk about it. If we're going to talk about ancient astrology, right? Like looking at the fixed stars and making forecasts or predictions in horoscopes that really focus more on the fixed stars, and it's kind of sidereal rather than tropical or Western. The Pleiades in ancient astrology corresponded to both the moon and Mars, and this is important to consider in terms of the beings themselves and the starseed nature, because what I have found is that part of the branding that I find suspicious is the aspect that is primarily on the feminine end of the spectrum for the Pleiadian, which is very empathic, very nurturing, very mystical, very healing. But also the boundaries are so bad empathically on that side without the balance. So many of my starseed clients who have Pleiadian markings, many of them actually have their natal Mars as one of their primary Pleiadian markings. And this is important to consider because it's the balance in the Pleiadian nature, just like the balance in nature itself, that is the expression of the Pleiadian signature in its fullest and its most pure form. And when we get too into either side, which is what has happened with the Orion influence, then there is only the ability to activate by being in opposition to both sides rather than a union of them. Now, in ancient astrology, the star cluster not only was about navigation and mostly, if we're talking about Greek, it's going to be navigation, but in their astrology, it's deep sorrow and tragedy, noted for not being good for eyesight. Blindness would come along with the Pleiades if it was aspected in any certain way. Now, a benefit of this position is that these are individuals, and again, especially as Pleiadian starseeds, they are excellent bereavement counselors because you are able to actually plug into the whole process of natural life. But there's something about the deep sorrow and tragedy that really follows the Pleiadian star cluster in ancient astrology. And Ptolemy straight up was like, their influence is distinctly evil. Why was it like that in in those very masculine oriented Greek society? That's very interesting. So they are the companions of Diana. So Diana is very connected to the Amazonian woman archetype, and it may not have been an archetype. It's very likely that anthropologically and archaeologically there's been discovery that there were actual like women that lived on this island that were all women. This is when the Pleiadian nature went sideways with the feminine, because these were the Amazonians. Think of Wonder Woman, but instead of the Wonder Woman getting shacked up with what's his face that's played by Chris Pine, they would murder, they would get pregnant, they would go off and only fraternize with men in order to get pregnant, and then they would kill off the male children. This is the myth, or the mythos of the Amazonians, right? And so the Pleiadian seven sisters were the companions of Diana, and it's said that there is a faction that did not. Maybe that's where they were put, on a different island, and that's how they evolved. Or maybe there was a faction that stayed behind. Who knows? But this Amazonian woman aspect, the masculine and the feminine together, but in a way that actually is not healthy at all. And I know that that's, the Amazonian woman is something that has been propped up in our modern society in terms of some sort of feminist ethic. But you should really ask yourself, like, if you are killing off all of the men and killing the men that impregnated you to keep your pure female society, what that actually means. And we could talk a lot about that, and if it was necessary, if it's not necessary. But what I'm saying is, in Dan Winter, again, if you're into his stuff, he does talk about this, about how the Pleiadians were the most violent because they were the most connected to survival and the materium, and a sense of bringing their masculine and feminine together and not pushing it away. But what happens when they push them away? You get super masculine patriarchy, and then you get Amazonian women and a sense of Lilith gone awry. So, and in ancient astrology, they were not like, it was not a favorable position to have the Pleiades in your chart. Deep sorrow and tragedy, blindness, distinctly evil. Now, do I think that that's the case? No. I wonder why. I haven't dug into Ptolemy why he would say that, but that is kind of the idea here. And so it's too bad I didn't get any pictures of Amazonian women or Wonder Woman. So you could, again, there's so much out there, so you can do the research, get into it. What I can help you with is find the markings in your chart, weave them together into a larger narrative of your astrological blueprint, and then talk about what that actually means in real life. So where you find your starseed markings is going to have a lot to do with how those Pleiadian aspects are expressed. For me, it's my nadir. It's my fourth house cusp that is in conjunction with the Pleiades. So where I draw my home, right? My emotional home is the Pleiades, right? And so when you're, in terms of where my rootedness in my natal chart is, it has a lot to do with the intensity of the Pleiadian nature in terms of its connection. And I don't want to say survival, but when you're in a material world and you're in communion with it, it's just part of being in the material world, right? You want to protect yourself. It's instinctual, right? That there's an instinct to preserve oneself when you're in material form that just comes along with the territory. So that's a part of the Pleiadian nature that I think is intentionally left out of the mainstream narrative about Pleiadian starseeds. I feel really strongly about that. So Pleiadian starseed, before we get into the charts and we go through the rest of this report in terms of the astrology, the Pleiadian starseed in general, here, we can just bring up the chart and you can kind of check it out while I'm talking to you about the Pleiadian chart, or the Pleiadian starseed stuff in the chart. And also too, There we go. Can you see that, guys? Yes. This is our full moon, which is really when this is like kicking off. It was official when the North Node came into 0 degrees Gemini, which is in fact Alcyon. That degree is meant to be a translucent mind, but the mind's still there nonetheless, right? You're not submerged in the ocean. And there's something really striking to me about the myth, the Greek myth about Alcyon and Poseidon, that seems to speak to this degree very strongly, which is that there's not meant to be no boundary. And the story with Poseidon really seems to suggest that there was a violation of that boundary that is meant to naturally be there, which is your own psyche at such an early stage is not ready necessarily to be submerged in the plasma woo itself. But 0 degrees Gemini is the opportunity to gaze upon the entirety of it with the first burgeoning of consciousness, right? It's very striking to me. Anyway, so when we're talking about Pleiadian starseeds themselves and the traits that they exhibit, yes, empathic. These are people that are healers, empaths. They are, very dreamy and watery people and artists. But the boundaries tend to be very poor until you bolster your masculine, because the Pleiadian starseeds and the Pleiadians in general are about the union of the polarity within themselves at an instinctual level. And the best and the most obvious way to express that for the Pleiadian and the Pleiadian starseed is through sexual contact. Sexual activity is incredibly healing for the Pleiadian, but it has to come from the highest intention, like actual love with the people involved have to feel that genuinely. It has to be something that is not intended to produce anything necessarily in intention. That is Scorpio. It is meant to be what it is, and through that expression there's healing and there's balance of our own gender polarity. So and it doesn't matter your own sexual identity or even your gender identity or preference in that exchange. It's really about the polarities with the people involved finding their balance within this very physical act that is part of being a mammal, but certainly be part of being a human and part of being Pleiadian, right? This is a big part of how they interact. So the best expression or example I've ever seen so far is actually from the movie Cocoon, if you remember that. So, Hollywood and their machinations aside, in that movie, Steve Guttenberg's just like the dude that they befriend, and it's that they're trying to get their cocoons off the planet, and they've left them, and the old people are staying young because the cocoons with the beings are in their pool and all of this stuff. So Ali Sheedy is got her human suit on, and she's in the pool with Steve Guttenberg, and they clearly are into each other, and so she shows them how they have intercourse, and it's like a ball of light that hits him and he has this orgasmic experience, right? It's very light body oriented, but still very physical for him. This is a really good, in my experience and in the time that I've spent really getting to know Pleiadian nature, within myself and the people around me, and through sexuality and studying it actually for a long time. This is this is the way. So it's about balancing the polarity, though. Excuse me. Not being exclusively flowy and watery and in that space. And I'm not saying that that's good or bad. And you don't also want to get caught in the other side of it, which is the distinctly survival mode on either side of your polarity. This is where I think the Orion influence has corrupted a lot of the original Pleiadian intention, and has been for a long time, unfortunately, for a long time, which is why I'm here to talk to you about it, and other people too, because it's not all, sunshine and rainbows with the Starseed mission. It is actually a mission. So there's balancing of the polarity. Right now, a lot of Pleiadian starseeds will not be gender conforming, and it doesn't necessarily mean being trans or not identifying as a certain gender, but gender roles will easily move around for Pleiadian starseeds, and I find that to be pretty consistent with my own experience and other people's as well. Let's see what else. A Pleiadian starseed is going to be like, I want everybody, let's not keep score, so that everybody plays and everybody has fun and we all enjoy ourselves playing the game and enjoying the process of it. An Orion starseed is going to be like, oh yeah, we're keeping score, because how am I going to be able to measure that I'm getting better if we don't keep score, if that makes sense. And you can see how these two influences could definitely be corrupting each other over time, based on what is wanted out of it. But ultimately, this whole time frame between now and May is so distinctly Pleiadian, again, which is about returning to our own roots genetically, and returning to the roots of this planet and what she offers to us as children of her, and certainly to divine source. There's never a disconnect from that ever. And part of the Pleiadian nature is that seamless connection too, but it comes through material, and I know that that's going to sound counterintuitive, but it's about communing and aligning with the natural world, and realizing that energy is infinite in the process of being expressed in a material cyclical way. So anyway, that's kind of like, all of the, different ways to think about the Pleiadian nature and a lot of different perspectives. And I invite you to go and, look into the astronomy, look into different perspectives on what it means to be Pleiadian starseed. Look into people who are talking about this and challenge yourself to listen to things that you're like, I don't like that. Just listen. You don't have to like it, because you're going to find out a lot of things and a lot of contradictions in this realm. And it's important that you're priming your own gut and your own instinct, which is, again, very Pleiadian, because it's about being in touch with what is. There's one more thing that I needed to say about that, and I don't remember what it was. It just flew right out of me. So we'll just get into the astrology now, and we're just going to look at a very basic overview of how these particular markings are going to evolve over the course of the next couple of months. And it's really going to start with this full moon in Cancer. I've talked a lot about this I just posted another weekly report that's looking at the full moon and the week after, and per sign, right? The forecasts per sign are already up on YouTube and BitChute, so you can get an idea of where this particular transit's going to connect to you in your house. But there is this mystic rectangle, as we see here, because there's the opposition with the sun and the moon. There's the opposition with the nodes, which are at 0 degrees. 0 degrees Alcyon, 0 degrees Gemini is Alcyon, 0 degrees Sag, and 30 degrees Scorpio is Alpha Centauri, right? And those star seeds and those beings, number one, Alpha Centauri is our closest stellar neighbor. It's like 4 to 5 light years away, and it's a trinary star. The two bigger stars are in a binary with each other, and they're very similar to our star. And then the third one, Proxima Centauri, is actually closer to us, and it's still part of their larger 3-star system, but it's way smaller. That's called a red dwarf. It's smaller, it's less energy output, things like that. But Alpha Centauri is not very far away in terms of light years, and those star seeds and those beings tend to be very self-sacrificing. They tend to give a lot in terms of what they have to offer, right? It's in providing, and it's kind of interesting that this is where the South Node is sitting, whereas Alcyon is really just in a position of beholding the full experience of what is at the unconscious level, right? That is what the ocean truly represents. And it's this translucent aspect of the mind that we're really being pulled towards, as opposed to being, moving away from a time or moving away from a dynamic that is for all intents and purposes, really noble and honorable, and to be self-sacrificing and to give of yourself so much. But we're moving away from that into a realm of total experience in what is, and in what has value. So this is the beginning of this Pleiadian time, because each of these markings, the nodes and the moon and the sun at the full moon, they're all Pleiadian markings. Every single one of them is a starseed marking for the Pleiades. So the sun position in particular is a galactic degree for the planetary crystal grid, right? 26, 25, 26, 27 degrees, they're all galactic degrees, but in Capricorn, it is the grid. And it's not just the grid, but it's the core, the crystal core of the planet that was moved away after Atlantis, moved away or got, moved by the sheer force of the, sloshback of the water of the planet. It moved that huge crystal deposit. It's actually in Arkansas. So, but this particular degree is also referencing at it from an energetic and from an ancient perspective as well. And so all of this mystic rectangle, right, all of these blue lines around it are opportunities to invest and harmonize and to find balance and security in and foundation around these two very opposing aspects that are very, very Pleiadian in nature. So it's like the opposition within us, right? Because that's the sun and the moon, and the opposition of our soul's journey, right? Of knowing where we've come from and knowing where we're going and just being aware of that. Those things are all very challenging in and of themselves. And it's the way that they interact with each other in this mystic rectangle that is going to actually allow ourselves to see, like, where when we return to nature, when we return to the root of who we are, is it truly going to hold water in the face of massive institutional destruction? And where are we finding our power? Is it in the process of the demolition? Is it in the grid, the organic grid that exists beyond all of that? Or is it in the aspects of the institutions that are falling away? Because that's going to show really obvious. This is going to be a very intense full moon with all of this in line. So starseed aspects are going to be what Pleiadian starseed aspects are going to be what kind of gets us through to the other side. And it's really the whole nature of this cycle that started with the lunar eclipse at 28 degrees Taurus, the eclipsed moon. So there's something fundamentally that we are releasing, that if we align with the Pleiadian part of ourselves or find some guidance with what they represent, we know that just because the biological aspects find their cycle, whatever that is, that doesn't mean that we cease to be. And in fact, we can go back to something even deeper than this surface level shit that is happening right now. It's a necessary part of the process that seems pretty clear, but we don't have to identify with it. So let's see here. Let me get my notes out so we can look at where we're going here. Let's look at what I want to do is actually open up a chart that's going to be a lot easier to move through. Let's see if it's on here. It sure is. And this is today. I've already done this report today. So we're going to move ahead here to, like I said, the 17th. That's the full moon. I wanted you to see in particular the shape of the mystic rectangle, right? This is where those really difficult oppositions have a means of problem solving that surrounds it, right? Things that we can cooperate with and that we can find a sense of foundation with those trines and harmony that allow us to at least be able to make something of what are two very powerful but challenging things. So especially this full moon. I cannot... oh, boy. All right. I feel like I laugh like that all the time, but that's just the nature of reality right now, is that level of intensity. So here we go. That's what I want to show you. Now, the first thing that's going to happen here is that after the full moon, we will see that, oops, not that. So Mars is going to be at the galactic center, and this is the first real aspect with a Taurus north node, as we see here, Rahu moving now into 30 degrees. And this is a peacock strutting, right? Strutting along the terrace of an old castle. It is a consummation of everything that has come before us and is nothing more, I wouldn't say nothing more, but is purely just the consummation of a natural process coming to fruition. Now, the trine to the last degree of Capricorn is truly interesting to me, and I talked a lot about this in the astrology report for this week. So it's a good overlay. But what I will say is the last degree of Capricorn is the Sabian symbol is like, the secret boardroom members, right? It's the cabal. It's the small group at the very top of the pyramid that we don't even know exists that's making decisions for the entire institution. And to be in a trine with this Pleiadian north node, especially after the sun has come off of its conjunction with Pluto at the Pluto return point of the United States natal chart, I would say that that this full moon is going to be instrumental in then finding our own individual voice through whatever body is making decisions. And if that is the organic template of God, then that is going to be who has the final word in this boardroom in terms of each of our own expression and sun. But it could be, this is why it's important to be mindful about which frequency band you are aligned with, because it's going to be very connected to this consummation that we are all being pulled towards as our soul's evolution, a material consummation that is connected to a material unfolding at the political and social and in some ways the universal level. So this is the first real connection to the Pleiadian nature other than the North Node and that full moon, right? This trine here is very important. Let's see, and Mars will be at the galactic center. So the galactic center, 26 degrees Sagittarius, does have a lot of, Arcturian. This is an Arcturian starseed position. Andromeda. Ooh, this is a big one for Andromeda too, and the Andromeda galaxy. So the galactic center of the Milky Way also is in favorable connections to Arcturus, either a sextile or a direct trine from Andromeda, from Arcturus. So Mars is our crusader right now in Sagittarius. So depending, again, this is going to be very powerful, while these, this might be the crusader, but this is the boss, right? This is the boss, the high boss, and making a decision and making it so, right? Making the decision, the executive decision in terms of society that will find complete traction with a consummation of where we're all headed to on a soul level. This is going to be a very interesting next couple of weeks. It really is. Let's see. And then the sun moves right into Aquarius. Now keep in mind that the sun is at its detriment in Aquarius. This is where it's the least powerful, is in Aquarius, because the sun is Leo, right? It's our sovereign nature, our authentic voice being expressed, each and every one of us, like the center of our own solar system. When it's in Aquarius, it's at its weakest, and so we don't feel nearly as emboldened and combust in terms of our own individual selfhood. We find ourselves expressing ourselves in conjunction with humanity as a whole. That's not an accident that Martin Luther King Jr. Day is pretty much when the sun comes into Aquarius. Service work, right? Find yourself through service to humanity, and that's a great concept. But at the same time, we know that the sun is the weakest here. This is still Pleiadian, by the way, in even 0 degrees Aquarius is the crack between worlds. Like, this is even more, this is like going from, this is the shamanic realm here, from the physical material into the energetic and the astral as well. 0 degrees and all, 0 degrees, especially as this, these galactic degrees for Pleiadian markings. So as the moon, before this happens, comes into Leo, I talked about this already, I just want to draw attention to it again, is to not forget who we are, right? Not to forget who we each are as sovereign individuals. We'll feel into that because it's going to be necessary to remember this feeling as the sun moves through Aquarius, and that voice becomes just part of a much, much, much louder hum or vibration or buzzing, perhaps. Who knows? Aquarius is either the hive or it is an organic template of realized, completely actualized individual sovereign beings, and that's more powerful than anything. So, but the most difficult, I would say, to achieve, and we are really on the cusp of getting there. We really, really are. We just have to stay smart about it because there's too much at stake for other people to keep the reins on this whole process. So let's see here. I don't want to get too much in the minutia of right now because I want to look at the whole picture of where we're going. So Mars is going to come into Capricorn during this time. Oh man, it's going to be so great. Now Mercury is going to move back into Capricorn as well as we go through the month of January. It's in its retrograde, so blah, blah, blah. The Sun and Mercury are going to meet. I already talked about that in the other report. And then you're going to see Mercury hits that 0 degrees Aquarius, comes back into Pleiadian territory in its retrograde, and then comes into a trine, the same place where the Sun was, right? That boardroom. And this is going to be, did we get all the information? Maybe we should go back over did somebody take notes in the meeting? Maybe we should go back over it and go back over those notes and the minutes, that's what I'm trying to say, and see what was actually said, see what was actually decided upon. Maybe go back over and review whether or not that's what we actually want to be giving our voice to. And it doesn't, the problem is that it's already well on its way, but Mercury in its retrograde is going to at least give a mental review of what this is going to mean, right? Moving forward in a consummation of everything that's been building. Now, also, too, you see that Uranus is now direct. So, things are really going to be shifting in that landscape of currency and assets and material value and worth, all of those Taurus themes. The actual ground itself, our house, anything that is an asset and has physical value, material value, and even our relationships, right? It's really the fertile ground in which we grow within. So that can have a lot of different meanings. But it's now going to start moving around a lot more than it was before, outside of us with Uranus and Mercury in this trine. Again, these all Pleiadian markings, right? To have this opportunity to at least mentally reassess or mentally consider internalizing, going back over the minutes, right? Going back over what has been decided, and finding some groundedness with what is unfolding at a soul level as a result of that. That's Mercury retrograde's not all bad. I have natal Mercury retrograde, so I'm all in. I'm just like, yes, I love editing and proofreading. I want to know exactly what I've been thinking about and put it through its own rigor. So let's see. All right, guys. Venus is going to station direct, and then we're going to come into the Aquarius New Moon, which is also to the beginning of the Chinese New Year. This is going to be the official beginning of the year of the water tiger, and I'll talk about that too in the new moon report for this time. So, but in terms of starseed stuff, right? Let's Mercury's gonna station direct at 25 degrees Capricorn. Let's see, what day is that? Right after this new moon, actually. So that's still technically, I would say, in Pleiadian territory. 24 to 25 degrees Capricorn is still in a direct trine to the Pleiades. And this is going to then take a lot of that reconsideration in that realm of the Pleiadian territory, and especially around the galactic crystalline structure of the planet, the planetary grid. We're going to start taking those mental concepts and moving them back forward over this territory. Let's see here. Mars is going to square. Now, you can see that Mars is already in Capricorn, and it's going to come into a square with Chiron. And these two are Lyran starseed points where Mars and Chiron are. Now, Chiron is in a not very favorable position to to the Lyran or the Lyran starseed, but Mars is absolutely. So this there's going to be a certain amount of trust here that we're going to have to just act upon, right? And it's going to feel really strange, but if we are willing to allow old images to have a new symbolic meaning to us, especially when it comes to our healing of our inner child and really addressing the shame and guilt about being ourselves, if we start to see it in a different way, like if we have old images that have now evolved into meaning something new, even though that ultimately is going to, that square is going to be very challenging. It's also going to, there's some real courage here. And the Lyran starseed aspect is a big part of it, right? We can really output our energy. We can have a goal of actually trusting trusting what we are participating in, trusting what we are building, right? Mars is outputting into a goal, and part of that is trusting the people we're involved with. I think that this is so great, actually. I mean, it could change at any minute, but right now this seems like the perfect opportunity to muster our courage and really get past some old identities in order to start creating and putting our energy towards a new goal, a new set of goals when it comes to the matrix of reality we want to be part of, right? That's where our choice comes in. Okay. Mercury Trine. So Mercury's moving back in its forward motion, and so that means it's going to be in a trine to Rahu again, and this is just territory that we're going back over and over and over again, like in our minds, really coming to be aware of it, to cognize it, to wrap our minds around a lot of this. Pluto now is in trine to the North Node as well. 27 to 28 degrees. These are, again, more Pleiadian aspects. Reading the writing on the wall, right? Pluto is it's kind of hard to read the writing on the wall when the wall is being knocked down. Does that make sense? And so if that's what we're relying on, is our ability to read the signature of something that is being destroyed, I think that that could be difficult. So the trine, again, to Taurus is like, hey, maybe you could read the writing about, just seeing that the wall is being destroyed is enough to give a sense of what's going on. I don't know, but I do feel like that, again, this transformative consummation type of energy with Taurus, in late Taurus, in the Pleiades, there is a powerful transformational potential here with this trine. Now, this is where it gets interesting because the sun is moving along at a nice clip here in Aquarius. It met Saturn already at this point and is going to come into this full moon in February. That is this is bringing up the Atlantean issue pretty strongly. So if we go to the 16th, we see here this. Now, first of all, this is a grand square because, again, there's an opposition with the North Node that's not being shown in this chart, like it's not being drawn, but just know that it's there. And then you see a grand square or a grand cross because you have the cross in the middle and then you have all the squares on the outside. Now these 20, like I said, you're getting pretty close here to the Atlantean galactic degrees, especially Leo and Aquarius here in opposition at this full moon. And then you have the Pleiadian nodes that are in conjunction with Algol, by the way, right? Ahead of Medusa and at the at 26 to 27 degrees Scorpio. It's a grand square. There's no getting around this karmic moment that of the crossover here, or the like time folding back over to this Atlantean time period. And we want to emerge from this chrysalis, right? And we want to find ourselves emerging from this societal chrysalis, or we want society to come through this transformation period, and we want to find ourselves in it. But well, the opposition and the full moon at this point is going to be a pretty clear reflection of how we feel about our own emergence in the face of that. And it's something way more, if this is like a butterfly coming out of the chrysalis, this is like a mermaid coming out of the ocean, right? This is coming out of the unconscious, and you have the moon involved as well. And this is coming out of, it's not even fully formed yet, but it's starting to come forward in how we feel. And it's going to be the result of this moment of metamorphosis or emergence that is each of us in the full social setting. It's the square with the Pleiadian nature at the nodal axis, and the fact that it's in conjunction with algal, right? We have to release that part of ourselves that is toxic in order to address a much bigger threat, which is the Kraken. If you, if you go into Greek mythology or Clash of the Titans, I mean, that's really what happened. Is Perseus came and he chopped off the head of the Gorgon still turned the Kraken to stone when he came to collect his sacrifice, which was Andromeda. So, but there's no getting around this square. I mean, and to put it simply here is that do we want to redo? The question is, and at a national level, I would even say with the United States, since we still have Pluto at the Pluto return of the United States right now, 27 to 28 degrees of Capricorn, are we able to actually do Atlantis right? Is it going, can we do it? Can we come forward? And the part of there's something about our original coding. There's something about the trauma around that absolutely has to be released from our very DNA. And there's something very powerful about this particular aspect of it, which is the North Node in conjunction with algal. It's the direction we're being pulled into, and it has to do with adapting to what is by letting go of that which is ready to be released, or that which has been holding us back, right? The Gorgon is Medusa. Medusa was turned into a monster because, again, she had this consummation with the collective unconscious that turned her into a monster, and she turns people to stone. Now, whether or not that was, however that comes about for you, it's the release of that experience and that particular, it's the release of that experience that is shown with the chopping off of the head of Medusa that is really pulling a lot of the energy towards it, right? Because it's the North Node. So it's already pulling in this direction. And then you have this incredibly potent Leo full moon that is not only Atlantean in nature, but is pretty much sitting on President Trump's ascendant now of his 30 degree Leo. And Leo the lion, right? I mean, we're going to want to have our sovereign nature come forward, even if it's not totally formed yet, right? It's coming right out of the ocean as a result of, our connection to the whole. Civilization is evolving, along with our own evolution. But there's something, there's something of a reckoning here and an emergence, but it has a lot to do with the fact we can't get away from the reckoning of the Atlantean story, and the fact that the United States is intimately connected to that story in a lot of different ways. And it's just going to make itself known. And this is also, this is the same time that Venus and Mars come together in a conjunction. look, it's pretty much the very same time when I talked about earlier with the release of our chains, right? This is an actual very powerful union of divine feminine and masculine, right? The seed point of life and the fertile soil coming together in Capricorn, in the actual matrix, and initiating something and releasing ourselves from the bondage of what has been. Whew. Yeah, it's going to really break loose come this time in February. So, but we're still in Pleiadian territory in terms of the nodal axis. So we do get a Sirian type of impact here in the March new moon, because now you see that everything is moving into Aquarius and Pisces, right? As we come into March, we're not quite at the equinox yet. The sun is in Pisces. There is, if we go back a couple hours on the 3rd, you'll see that the new moon is going to be happening, or the 2nd, my bad. It's on the 2nd. March 2nd is the Pisces new moon, and it's in trine to Sirius. So this is a Sirius new moon in conjunction with Jupiter in Pisces, no less. So also in trine to Sirius right now. So this is when that aspect of the Sirian starseed steps into focus. And it's the Sirians that I think have, in terms of Sirian starseeds, not the country of Syria and those people. I'm talking about the Sirian starseeds and the beings from the Sirius star system, which is like the brightest star in our sky, and represented the time of year that the Egyptians could prepare for the Nile to flood, because the Heliacal rising of Sirius was the marker, the temporal marker for that time of year. So this was abundance and bounty and through the water, emotion, right? And it's the womb, and it's that aspect, the mother aspect of the feminine, whereas the Taurus aspect is the maid, right? It's kind of innocent, and it hasn't taken, there's no, it's just fixed, right? There's no cardinal energy like there is with Cancer, and that's where Sirius is in the skies, and the sign of Cancer. So in Western astrology, in terms of which constellation it's part of, I do believe it's part of Canis Major. So as we move through this time, we also see, look at this lineup. Oh my gosh. At the same time, we have Mercury and Saturn together in Aquarius. We have Mars, Venus, and Pluto all in the same degree of Capricorn. Jeez. Wow. And then we have this Sirian new moon in March. So I don't know what this is going to look like, but the Sirian aspect, which is the space in which we create, that is got this guardianship to it. And I think that their intention as beings and how intimately connected they are, again, not only to the Egyptian, but the mystery schools and the secret societies, and the feminine in and of itself as the space in which we create. There is no true creation without the space in which to create. And this is where the dark and the light as interacting aspects is initiated, right? And this is why I think a lot of the secret societies, the mystery schools, really focused on Sirius. Besides the fact that they also knew that these beings came here and they were still part of the Atlantean story. Again, I don't have facts for that part. That's just my own opinion based on my experience and my own consideration. What I can tell you is that this is where the things are in the astrology, but they're Sirian markings, every single one of them. And so you can bet that there's going to be a considerable amount of expansion and an activation of the Sirians when it comes to being an example of what we can do at our highest version, and stepping into a position of leadership and guardianship in some ways. That's the thing. Remember, Pisces, there's that little thin bridge, there's that isthmus, got to keep it clear. Just like you have to keep your root system has to be strong and vital in order to bring up what you need, which is the waters of your soul. This is what the Syrians are really capable of doing. I think that my personal opinion is that they did try to help some of them. You know, you're talking about a star system that may have many planets. So there's a lot of different types of Syrians. And these are the star seeds that tend to be shamans. They tend to be the energy workers. They talk to animals. They talk to plants. They have a really fierce advocacy and protection and guardianship of the natural world, and which is what shamans do. And that's because they have this strong connection to the creative force of the feminine and of the family that we all are with each other, right? This is, again, the Cancerian element. So to 12 to 14 degrees Pisces is in a direct trine. So this is the master level of that, going into the astral realm. The shaman goes into the realm of the Pisces, right? Goes into the astral realm, walks between the worlds, goes into the able to access the morphogenetic field or the astral realm in order to do the work that the shaman is meant to do. Being a shaman is not the same as being a good person. Right? There are a lot of dark sorcerers out there that are practicing through shamanic techniques. So again, this new moon is really going to allow us to set some intentions around whose example we're really going to follow when it comes to the Syrian nature, okay? And how we're going to maybe represent ourselves while this is happening. Venus and Mars, this is, I mean, look at this. This is incredible. These three lined up with Pluto, Saturn, and Mercury in Aquarius together, and then this Syrian new moon. Yeah. Whew, looking forward to March. And it won't take long before the Sun and Jupiter come together. This is so beautiful and inspiring, incredibly inspiring when these two come together at this degree. And then we also have Venus and Mars come together again, and this time they're in the 0 degrees Aquarius. This is another Pleiadian activation here, and this is about the spiritualization of the civilization, right? The ideal of a human collective is represented by 0 degrees of Aquarius. So again, more activation on where we are going and who we are as a whole. Let's see, Saturn's still here, Mercury's here. Now, this aspect of Aquarius, as we saw with the full moon, is in square to the Pleiades. So keep that in mind, too, that the last degrees of Aquarius are much more Orion-oriented and in a lot of tension with the Pleiadian aspect. And that's because, you know, you're getting into territory here that is incredibly intellectual and very high-minded and high mental vibration with Aquarius. And so Orion nature, really good with this place. Pleiadian nature, it's there. But it's like where Atlantis went wrong, right? It's too focused on the mental and too focused on the hive, and not as much of the experience and the love and the compassion. So this is why the Pisces time is so important, and that Syrian nature coming through. So another thing that is really let's see here. Neptune eventually is going to, at the end of March, is going to sextile Rahu, which is really where we're starting to get into the last bit of time where the nodes are in the Pleiadian area. And this follows the trajectory of the eclipse season too, which is that by the time we get to the next eclipse cycle in May and get to the other Pleiadian lunar eclipse that's a complete opposite, with a sun conjunct Algol, by the way, right? 26 to 27 degrees of Taurus. By the time we get there we will have gone through quite a bit. And you can see how everything is stacking up to be over here in this side. Now things are starting to slip into Aries because now we've crossed the vernal equinox. Mercury is now in Aries with the sun, and there's going to be a lot of freshness come, late March as usual. But what we're going to see here is Neptune is in a sextile here to the North Node, and in order to survive, we will be pulled in a direction, I feel like, that will really amplify our need to be in survival mode. And it's going to be a willingness to surrender ourselves to a very close microcosm of people that we are able to really organize ourselves with and take be very realistic with ourselves about our limitations and our dharma. And when we can do that, I think it'll really assist and allow us to invest into a soul journey experience that is going to really test our survival mechanism. I do feel like now Neptune will be in a trine to the South Node, which is about bringing the peak experience into your everyday life. And that's, again, going to assist really well with your surrender to whatever's right around you and working with that, right? And coming to terms with what is, and working in a small group with the people on your little desert island, right? This is distinctly Pleiadian as well. This goes back to being able to harmonize with those around you, and in a very compassionate and distinctly spiritual way when you have Pisces involved with Neptune. And it's really with the beginning of April and the new moon in Taurus, right? We already had a new moon in Aries, and then we had the equinox, and we just had that, like I said, that sextile with Rahu and Neptune. We're soon going to have Jupiter meet Neptune. This is no longer as much of a it's no longer as much of a Pleiadian aspect when, the node is not involved. But by the time we get to this point, right, there'll be, it's not a Taurus new moon. It's definitely a Aries new moon once we get to April, right? And you can see that you got Mercury, you got the sun, you got Chiron, you got the moon all huddled together in this first to second decan of Aries. And it's going to be very much about me, which, it's good, right? And something new and fresh, something new being born, something new being initiated, right? New seeds being, and this is when we're preparing to really plant seeds and we start to recognize the potential of our growth during the spring. And so this is when the window really closes for the nodal axis being in conjunction with the Pleiades, okay, is April. And so we'll move through April, and then it's by mid-April that we start to finish the eclipse season, because it's going to be in mid-April when the sun comes into Taurus that we have a Taurus new moon that is going to be a Taurus new moon that is going to be an eclipse, right? Here we go. 10 degrees, 10 to 11 degrees Taurus. It's pretty close to Uranus at this point. Mercury will be at Alcyon. So here's a little bit of mental, go back to that 0 degrees Gemini in the Pleiadian nature within. But at this point now, we're going to start coming out of one eclipse cycle and going into another. And you can see, again, everything is kind of stacked up over here. You have Saturn that is in square to the Pleiadian node area. Again, this is very close to where we had that full moon. And Pluto stations retrograde, right? 28 to 29 degrees Capricorn. So not quite going into Aquarius yet. So by the time we get to April into May, it's going to be this, the cycle is going to start, or the Ouroboros or the infinity sign. We're going to start crossing pathways around this time and then coming back around and starting a whole new Pleiadian cycle in May with a lunar eclipse. Oops, let's go back. I think it's the 16th. Yeah, a full moon lunar eclipse with the sun at Algol. Actually, that's not totally true. Hold on. Let me make sure. So by the time we get to May and we get to this eclipse in and of itself, right, you're going to see that it's, if you just go back or go forward, I'm sorry, a couple hours. I do believe it's on the 16th. Yes, it is. 25 to 26, right? Pretty close to Algol when we have this full moon lunar eclipse, and it's a T-square. Oh, look at that, with Saturn at 24 to 25 degrees Aquarius. And so again, another Pleiadian full moon lunar eclipse. This time the sun is in conjunction with the Pleiades, but it's in a square to Saturn. Oh boy. Yeah, we're going to, this is going to be when we have to really just kind of step up and be grown-ups about the situation, when we may be finding ourselves wanting to kind of bug out. At least emotionally. We might want to emotionally bug out, and we certainly are going to want to find a way to make it all feel better. And it's going to be the T-square with Saturn at 25 degrees Aquarius. Let me just read the Sabian symbol, and I think this might be a great place to end this particular report, because this is still starseed territory, right? This is just a big battle with the Orions, the Pleiadians in particular, and then the Sirians come marching in around March to add to it. So 25 degrees, 24 degrees, let's read 25 degrees, is a butterfly with the right wing more perfectly formed. It's the capacity to develop the rational and fully conscious aspect of the mind ahead of normal evolution. Oh, right? We're going to, oh boy, that's going to be a rough time, right? It's going to be a rough time because we're going to have to, this is Saturn, right? There's no getting around that. We're going to have to step into whatever this means, even though that it is in square to both of these Pleiadian positions. That'll be an eclipsed moon, by the way, right? But it's in these T-squares that we release the tension otherwise. And it's going to be about, it creates friction with that Pleiadian part of ourselves that wants to just adapt and to be in communion with what is, and that's where we're all headed over the next couple of months in terms of a soul journey. But this particular eclipse and full moon that's starting a brand new cycle, or not even starting, it's the solar eclipse that'll start the cycle, but it'll end definitively the last cycle. We've evolved, and it'll be very obvious, and we will have to kind of stand into that evolved version of ourselves as a way to minimize the weirdness with this full moon lunar eclipse. So I know that's a lot of information. Where are we at? We're about 120. I think that's pretty good considering how much content I just covered. So I am going to be offering a special reading rate for starseed readings. So if you're not following me on Telegram or you're not on my mailing list, I really recommend you do so, because that's where I'm going to release the actual promotional material for the starseed reading. I'm going to offer it at a discount, and I'm going to offer kind of a micro version so to can accommodate a lot of different financial situations that will at the very least give you like what your starseed markings are, and if they are distinctly Pleiadian, maybe expanding on that, but certainly for a more in-depth look of your whole chart, your progress chart, and weaving together a very cohesive narrative of your starseed origins. I mean, that'll be an option for that too, right? It's just a matter of how much time and investment you're going to make. So if you're not following me on Telegram, that link's in the description box below. You go to my website, that's also in the description box below, and you can get to my website, and there's a flash page that comes up, and you can get on my mail list, and I will send I send promotional, that's it's just a check-in and updates and announcements. I don't spam people with my email. That's what my video platforms are for me to be like, so And if you want to support this work through Subscribestar, that would be really great. You can link to that also from the description box. And of course, you can just hang out to the end of this video and listen to a cool song and get more information just in general about how to get involved, how to support the work, and how to learn more for yourself about catalyst energies and what I have to offer right now. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for taking the time to really invest in yourself and your own process around these starseed lineages, origins, and ultimately the mission that we're here to be part of. So if you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm going to keep my Facebook business page parked and kind of pin a message to be like, hey, I'm not here anymore, but I'm here. But DMs, I still will use Facebook Messenger. So if you still want to get a hold of me through that, I'm definitely still using that. So don't hesitate if you want to reach out and you have questions or you have concerns about anything. I'm definitely available through that as well. So you guys have a great weekend, since I am filming this or recording this on a Friday. Have a great weekend. I will link at the end of this video the weekly astrology report that I just posted as well, in case you're interested in that. And you can always help by liking this video and hitting that subscribe button. Commenting and sharing is so great to support this process for all of us. So I love you guys. I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for being here. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.